when I started working cold cases, now I'm looking at books that have supplemental reports written by detectives who are interviewing eyewitnesses. And now, because 30 years have gone by, 40 years have gone by, I don't have any access either to the eyewitness or to the report writer. Well, that's the Gospels. That's what we have. I have no access to Luke, and I have no access to who it was Luke was interviewing. I don't have any access to it. But now I can still use an approach I take in cold cases. Now, and the reason why I think that's helpful is because what I can do is I can introduce historical studies to a world that's largely interested in crime drama, true crime. So what I'm doing is trying to leverage that interest and here's what look, this is where I think we are right now, that I think it is going to be important for us in the next generation to help our kids see two things. Number one, is it true? Number two, is it good? We have to make both those cases. Is it true and is it good?
Yeah. And Jim, I really think you're right. For as many people, it might be that in older times, people would ask the question, is Christianity true first? And then wonder, is it good? Today, for a lot of people, that's reversed, where they want to know, is this even good before I even ask the question, is it true? They almost have to want it to be true first. That would be amazing if there was actually one day there could be perfect justice, but can I really believe that and be a reasonable person? And then some of these more traditional kinds of apologetics come in on the backside. And now they're going, I can believe this and still be a reasonable person. That we have to awaken that desire to see, the good and the true and the beautiful, that this actually can be real.
You're absolutely right. I just got done with a book that's coming out next May, which is called The Truth and True Crime. And what it really is a book that examines the goodness of Christianity based on biblical anthropology. In other words, it's got 15 attributes of human nature that you discover in crime scenes, in death scenes, that are really reflections of biblical claims about the nature of humans. And what you discover is that all of these features that modern sociologists now have determined are contributors to human flourishing, that are so critical for human flourishing. Well, they're all very ancient principles of Christianity that are now just kind of being rediscovered by modern sociologists, because if you're aiming at human flourishing, you'll hit a target that later on you will identify as Christianity every time. And so we want to be able to show, number one, it's another case for Christianity, but it's a case that I've not seen many people talk about, which is just the attributes of human nature that everyone who's a secularist right now would say, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that. Well, it turns out those are all biblical principles. They're very ancient. And there's another demonstration that the Bible describes the world the way it really is.
Yeah.
Including our human nature the way it really is. And if you want to know how to thrive as a human, you can do all you want. We've reimagined human thriving and human flourishing in the last 10 years. It's not a coincidence that as we move away from a cultural Christian worldview, we are moving into all kinds of increased drug use, increased mental illness, increase all the things that we're seeing right now. Well, no kidding. You're moving away from flourishing. So that's why it's important for us to be able to make a case. Is this true? Did the resurrection really occur? And that's why I wrote Cold Case, to show that, yes, that resurrection inference is the best inference from evidence.
Let me go back to something that you talked about in terms of direct evidence versus indirect evidence, because in chapter 3, you talk about that. Give us an example of how that comes into play in doing apologetics. How does direct evidence and indirect evidence come to play in the way you make the case for Christianity?
If you understand the rules of evidence, there are only two categories of evidence, right? Those two categories. And why that's helpful is because everything, and I do mean everything, falls into those two categories. So when you make a case, like, what counts as evidence? Yeah, everything. What's in the crime scene counts as evidence. Okay, what's missing from the crime scene? That counts as evidence too. What did he say? What didn't he say? What did he fail to say? That count. So both sides count. What did he do? What did he fail to do? Okay, it turns out every little thing he said counts, and every little thing he didn't say counts. It's just the nature of building cases in front of a jury. So everything in history that occurs a certain way, that's going to count. Everything that could have occurred but didn't, that's going to count too. And so when we look at the case for Christianity, it's really quite robust. And I think people will say, well, that doesn't count as evidence. Yes, it does. It does in every trial I've ever investigated. I think the problem is that people think if I don't have DNA or a fingerprint, I don't have any evidence. Well, look, I work cold cases. Guess what, folks? They're cold for a reason. They were lame to begin with. I've got no witnesses and no forensic evidence. That's why they went cold. Yet I've never lost a case, and we build them with all kinds of little things you would think are nothing, little bits and pieces of nothing that end up being so powerful because it's cumulative. So I always call this death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It's a death by 1,000 paper cuts case. Now, any one of those paper cuts, you might think, well, I'm not even sure that counts as evidence. Yeah, it does. And when you put them all together, it's like, oh, now the inference is really clear. So I think that part of what we're doing here is helping people to see that yes, all the statements, and we test direct evidence, but all the indirect evidence also works, also is helpful for us when we're making a corroborative case. So look, there are 4 ways to test this. Was it early enough to have been written by people who were really there? The eyewitness has to be present. 2, can it be corroborated in some way? Remember, it's only touch point corroboration. You don't have a video, an old cold case. I don't have videos. That was not technology that was available back then. So I'm only going to be able to confirm fractions of the overall account. 3, did they change their story over time? And 4, do they have a bias that would cause them to lie to us? Mm-hmm. If you cannot disqualify a witness for one of those 4 reasons, the judge will tell you you're not allowed to disqualify the witness. It's as simple as that. Well, I don't like the way he looks. That's not one of those 4 things. I don't like the way his voice sounds. He reminds me of a guy I know who's a really good liar. Those don't count. Okay.
Objection, relevance.
Yes, it's got to be one of those 4 things. And so I simply limited my investigation to those 4 things. And if you do that, you will see that the gospel authors pass those 4 tests in a way that Joseph Smith cannot in Mormonism.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's go to the gospel writers being motivated to lie. You talk about that in your book as well. I like that chapter. Can we trust the gospels? You said there are 3 reasons people are motivated to lie that you've uncovered. How did you investigate the witnesses, the gospels, with those 3 things in mind, and what'd you find?
There's only 3 motives. Now, these 3 motives stand on a platform like 3 award winners at the Olympics, right? The gold medal and the silver and the bronze. They're standing on a platform. The platform they're standing on is pride. So pride is the reason why all of us do anything stupid. If you needed one reason, it would be pride. But then that kind of fleshes out into 3 categories. And those 3 categories are behind every murder, and they're behind every theft, and they're behind every misdeed. Any misbehavior you've ever committed, it was only driven by one of these 3. Every sin ever committed in the history of sins has only been driven by one of these 3 motives. Standing on that platform called pride is number 1, financial greed. 2, sexual or relational lust. 3, the pursuit of power. Now, I would say that the first 2 are about 30% of all stupid. The last one, though, is probably about 70% of stupid. It's just an umbrella category that catches a lot of other stuff. So, for example, the pursuit of power is about my prideful thought that I am more important than you, and therefore I do things. So if I walk into a Walmart and kill 30 people who are a different color, what's that about? Well, that's the pursuit of power. That's me thinking my color matters more than somebody else's color. If I'm a gangster who shoots another gangster because he's disrespected me, what is that about? That's about authority and power and respect. And you disrespected me, you're going to die. That what happens if somebody is stealing from his parents so he can support his drug addiction. Well, what is that about? It's about my addiction, my pleasure is more important than your inconvenience. These are power issues, right? And they manifest themselves in certain behaviors. It's about 70% of stupid. So if you look at those 3, why they're helpful is because I often will hear people claim, well, if this is a lie, well, my question would be in front of a jury, why would he lie? Trust me, the defense is going to ask that. Well, my guy would never. Why would he lie? Well, I've got to be able to demonstrate what's in it for him. Why would you lie? There's got to be something in it from a sex, money, or power issue. And I think the people who are kind of in the know from a skeptical perspective, like a Bart Ehrman, his claim is that he also would agree. There's nothing in it from them for money. Nothing in the history of Christianity indicates anybody got rich off the scheme. And remember, we're not talking about one person. We're talking about 120 in the upper room in Acts 1, 500 listed by Paul in 1 Corinthians 15. How many people are making this claim? What is in it for them? Why would they say they saw their risen Christ? Were they getting money out of it? Were they getting girlfriends out of it? Now, I think what Bart would say is they're getting power, authority, and respect. They were nobodies. Now they're somebodies. They saw the risen Christ. Okay, so if you test that, Paul wrote most of the New Testament. So Paul, you're thinking he's not getting anything out of it in terms of money. He's not getting anything out of it in terms of girlfriends. You think he's getting something out of it in terms of power? Like, what is he getting out of it? He was already in a position of authority and power
Mm-hmm.
and respect with a larger religious group. Now he's going to jump in with the smaller one and get beat up all over the world for the next 30 years, so he could hopefully someday be where he started.
Mm-hmm.
Why even step out? You were
Yeah.
better off just staying where you were. So that motive issue is helpful for me. I never make motive my first line of investigation with a single suspect, because sadly, Mikhail, there are just crazy people who don't need a motive. But
Mm-hmm.
it's different when you have groups, because then you need everyone to be similarly wired, similarly crazy to do this. It's much more unreasonable than when you only have one suspect. One suspect, sadly, I will not be surprised by anything anymore. I mean, I've seen so many crazy things. And now when I work with officers and I hear the crazy things that officers experience right now in the country, I mean, it's like you think your experiences are crazy until you hear everybody else's experiences. So, but this is different. This is a group that has to be similarly motivated in order to tell the lie. To me, it's very. If someone asks me, Mikhail, is that possible? I always say yes, because anything is possible. But I always say quickly, but it's not reasonable. And the
Mm-hmm.
standard is not beyond a possible doubt; it's beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's why I'm in. I think
Right.
this passes beyond a reasonable doubt. Does Christianity pass beyond a possible doubt? Well, from what we can examine as limited humans, no. But that's not the standard, right? There's always going to be some question that could be leveled that I haven't thought about. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
something that, but that doesn't matter. That's a possible doubt. And
Mm-hmm.
judges tell juries they are to eliminate from their mind possible or imaginary doubts, because judges tell juries, I could level a possible or imaginary doubt against anything you believe. That's why you ought not consider them.
Mm-hmm.
Reasonable doubts are based on evidence.
Yeah.
So when someone
Yeah.
says, but what if? Well, do you have any evidence for that?
Right.
If you don't, then it's a what if.
Right.
That stays in the category of possible or imaginary. It doesn't fall into the category of reasonable.
Yeah. It's like what if in the world of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, well, what
Right.
if
Right.
this? Well, sure, you can, let's just imagine and have fun with it. But what evidence do you have so I can actually take that seriously?
We actually tell jurors, we have a set of sequences of images for jurors where we talk about these are the questions we never want you to allow in the jury deliberation.
Mm.
And one of those is just the question, what if? No, it's got to be based on the evidence that's been presented to you. You cannot do what's called speculating. Speculation
Mm-hmm.
is a jury instruction how not to
Mm-hmm.
speculate. And that's why I think that those rules of evidence are super helpful when just coming into conclusions about all kinds of things that you might encounter in life, including the claims of Christianity.